If you believe in destiny and stories of enduring love, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. New and original tales of romance are shared here every day, each more heartwarming than the last. Early autumn settled over the university campus with a thoughtful calm, the air crisp enough to sharpen awareness and soften memories at the same time. Maple leaves traced quiet arcs across stone paths. Students moved in gentle currents between buildings, and the mood felt introspective, as if everyone were carrying private hopes beneath ordinary routines. It was in this setting, lecture halls humming softly, libraries glowing at dusk, that fate prepared a meeting shaped not by sound, but by attention. He had been born deaf, and by 19 he had learned to inhabit the world with a composed distance that protected him from disappointment. He watched more than he spoke, read faces with care, and chose solitude when attention felt uncertain. In class, he sat near the aisle, notebooks neat, eyes focused, a presence calm and self-contained. To the observer of destiny, there was a quiet strength in the way he navigated spaces that rarely slowed for him. He did not ask to be noticed. He had learned that curiosity often came wrapped in pity, and that kindness could be fleeting when novelty faded. She noticed him anyway, not because he was different, but because he seemed deliberate, as if every movement carried intention. When the professor dismissed the class one afternoon, she lingered, rehearsing a simple greeting that felt suddenly complicated. She approached him with an easy smile and spoke his name, her tone warm and unassuming. He didn't respond. For a brief, awkward moment, she wondered if she had misjudged his attention, until the student beside him gently explained that he was deaf. The word landed softly, not as a barrier, but as information that changed the shape of the moment. She tried again, this time with small gestures and an open posture, pointing to her notebook, to the door, to herself, hoping meaning could bridge the gap. He met her effort with polite reserve. He nodded, offered a brief, practiced smile, and gathered his things as if to leave. It wasn't unkindness that closed the distance, it was fear. He had learned to step back before hope could lean too close. He worried she would be disappointed when curiosity met reality, or worse, that she was there out of sympathy. The unspoken language between them faltered, and he chose silence as a shield. Days passed. She saw him across the quad, in the library, near the cafe where steam fogged the windows in the afternoon. Each time she felt the same pull, not urgency, but a quiet insistence that the first attempt had been incomplete. She replayed the moment, not with embarrassment, but with resolve. If connection required effort, she would offer it honestly. The observer of destiny watched her choose patience over pride, understanding that persistence can be respectful when it listens more than it demands. She sought help not from him, but from learning. A language professor agreed to tutor her in sign language, warning that fluency would take time, humility, and care. She accepted the terms gladly. Evenings became practice sessions, fingers shaping meaning, eyes learning rhythm. She learned greetings, questions, the careful grammar of hands. Each lesson felt like a promise kept quietly. She did not tell him what she was doing. She wanted the language to be an offering, not a performance. When she approached him again weeks later, autumn had deepened, shadows longer and steadier. She signed his name slowly, clearly, and waited. Surprise flickered across his face, not theatrical but genuine. He responded cautiously, correcting her form with a small, patient motion. Conversation followed in fragments, tentative and sincere. He resisted at first, offering brief answers, measuring intent. She did not rush him. She asked simple questions, listened with her eyes, accepted corrections with gratitude. The unspoken language began to find its shape. Trust does not arrive all at once. It gathers. He tested the space between them, then allowed it to narrow. He shared that he feared being someone's lesson rather than their choice. She answered without grand declarations, only consistency. She returned. She practiced. She waited. The observer of destiny recognized the moment for what it was, a silent promise forming, not of certainty, but of care. And in that careful exchange, the spark was not loud, but enduring, ready to grow where respect had made room. The weeks that followed became a test not of desire, but of endurance. Autumn surrendered slowly to winter, and the campus changed its rhythm. Shorter days, quieter walkways, a colder air that made every choice feel more deliberate. Their conversations continued, measured and careful, unfolding in study rooms and shaded corners where distraction was minimal. He allowed the connection, but only within boundaries he believed were necessary for survival. He answered questions, shared small details, yet kept his heart guarded behind habits built over years of self-protection. His resistance was not indifference, it was memory. He remembered the way people's interest often faded once effort was required, how enthusiasm dimmed when communication demanded patience. He had learned to interpret withdrawal before it happened, to leave first rather than be left. So when she returned again and again, practicing signs with growing confidence, he felt both drawn and uneasy. Each improvement raised a question he was afraid to ask. How long would she stay? She sensed the hesitation and chose not to confront it directly. Instead, she focused on constancy. She arrived on time. She practiced daily. She listened more than she spoke, learning not only the language of signs, but the rhythm of his comfort. When he corrected her, she thanked him. When she made mistakes, she laughed softly and tried again. There was no urgency in her presence, no demand for reassurance. The observer of destiny watched as patience became her quiet argument. Pressure came from the outside as well. Friends questioned why she invested so much energy into something so uncertain. They asked whether she was prepared for the lifelong adaptations such a relationship would require, whether affection would be enough when misunderstandings multiplied. She listened without defensiveness because she understood the weight of those concerns. Yet each time doubt surfaced, she returned to the same truth. What she felt was not charity or curiosity, it was choice. He felt the pressure too, though it took a different shape. Watching her learn his language stirred a vulnerability he had kept carefully contained. It challenged the story, he told himself, that people always left once the novelty wore off. He began to fear disappointment more than isolation. There were days when he pulled back, answering messages late, shortening conversations, testing whether absence would weaken her resolve. Each time she responded with calm steadiness, neither chasing nor withdrawing. She simply remained. Winter settled fully, bringing early nights and a sharper quiet. One evening, after a long study session, she signed something she had practiced for days, that she understood his fear and that she would rather be honest now than leave him guessing later. She told him she wasn't there out of pity. She wasn't there to prove anything. She was there because learning his silence had taught her something about herself, about listening, about presence, about the courage to stay when staying is inconvenient. He did not answer immediately. Silence, for him, was not emptiness, it was consideration. He looked at her for a long moment, weighing risk against hope. The observer of destiny could see the conflict clearly. the longing heart pressing forward, the instinct for protection pulling back. When he finally responded, his signs were slower, deliberate. He admitted that trusting someone felt like standing at the edge of a cliff without knowing the depth below. He said he needed time, not to reject her, but to believe her. She accepted that condition without hesitation. Waiting, she understood now, was not passive. It was an act of faith. And so the long wait continued, not defined by distance, but by the courage required to let love approach at its own pace. The turning point arrived quietly, without ceremony, as winter began to loosen its hold and the first signs of spring edged into the campus air. The days grew lighter, and with the change came a subtle shift in him, less guarded, more present. He no longer tested her constancy with distance. Instead, he invited her into it. They studied together in sunlit corners, shared lunches where conversation flowed in signs and expressions, and began to laugh with an ease that surprised them both. What had once required effort now felt natural, shaped by mutual attentiveness rather than fear. Yet the final obstacle was not habit or hesitation, it was truth. He carried a doubt that words alone could not dissolve. The fear that she would one day wake and realize how much easier love could be with someone who did not require adaptation. He had seen that ending before, even if he rarely spoke of it. The observer of destiny knew that love, to endure, must face its deepest question openly. The confrontation came on an afternoon softened by early blossoms, when they sat beneath a tree near the library, petals drifting down like quiet punctuation. He signed slowly, carefully, choosing clarity over comfort. He asked her what would happen when the effort felt heavy, when misunderstandings accumulated, when the world reminded her again and again that loving him would always mean translating. His eyes held the question he had never dared to ask anyone before. Would she choose him when choosing him was no longer new? She listened without interrupting, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. Then she answered with the steadiness she had practiced for months. She told him that learning his language had not been a burden, it had been an opening, that the patience required had taught her to listen in ways she never had before. She admitted she did not know every challenge ahead, but she knew this much. Ease had never been what she sought. Presence was, and presence, she had learned, could be profound in silence. He resisted once more, not by pulling away, but by naming the last fear. He confessed that part of him still believed she deserved a simpler path, one unmarked by explanations and accommodations. Saying it aloud felt like surrender. The observer of destiny recognized the moment. Vulnerability laid bare, no defenses left to hide behind. She reached for his hands, grounding the space between them, and signed with care. She told him that love was not measured by convenience, but by commitment freely chosen. She did not want a simpler path, she wanted a truer one. She asked him to let her choose, fully and without apology. In that request was a promise, not loud, not dramatic, but unwavering. Silence followed, rich and deliberate. He looked at her as if seeing her anew, not as someone approaching his world, but as someone standing within it by choice. When he finally responded, his signs were gentle and certain. He said yes, not to perfection, not to certainty, but to the courage of beginning together. The resistance eased, not because fear vanished, but because it was no longer carried alone. They became a couple in the quietest sense of the word. No announcements, no spectacle, just a shared understanding sealed beneath a tree in early spring. The observer of destiny marked the moment as acceptance, not of circumstance, but of love that had earned its place through patience, humility, and truth. Spring unfolded fully, and with it came a gentler rhythm to their days, as if the world had adjusted itself to meet them where they stood. Blossoms filled the campus paths. Sunlight lingered longer in the afternoons, and what had once felt tentative now settled into something quietly certain. They moved forward together with intention, not rushing to define their relationship for anyone else, but honoring it through shared routines and deliberate care. Love, for them, was not declared loudly. It was practiced. They learned each other beyond the classroom and the early vulnerability that had first brought them close. He introduced her to the parts of his life shaped by silence, friends who signed with ease, places where he felt entirely himself, moments where sound was unnecessary. She introduced him to her world too, translating when needed, adapting naturally, never making him feel like an exception. What surprised them both was how balanced it felt. Neither was rescuing the other. They were simply meeting in the middle, again and again. Challenges did not disappear, but they no longer felt threatening. Misunderstandings happened, as they do in every relationship, but they learned to slow down instead of pulling away. When frustration surfaced, they addressed it with patience rather than assumption. He began to trust not only her affection, but her resilience. She began to understand that loving him had reshaped her idea of intimacy, not as something spoken, but as something witnessed and chosen daily. Their families noticed the change before they announced anything. She was calmer, more grounded. He was more open, more willing to be seen. When they finally shared their relationship openly, it was met not with surprise, but with a quiet recognition that something meaningful had taken root. He was not defined by what he lacked. He was known by how deeply he loved and allowed himself to be loved in return. Time continued its steady work. They graduated. Life expanded beyond the campus that had first brought them together. Decisions followed. Jobs, cities, plans that required coordination and compromise. Through each transition, they returned to the same foundation: communication shaped by intention, affection expressed through presence. The observer of destiny would note that their bond did not weaken with change. It matured, reinforced by every choice to adapt together rather than apart. The moment he proposed came without grand display. One evening, as dusk softened the sky into hues of lavender and gold, he took her hands and signed a question shaped by certainty rather than fear. He told her that she had taught him to trust silence, not as a barrier, but as a shared space. He asked if she would continue choosing that space with him, not because it was easy, but because it was true. She answered without hesitation, tears gathering as she signed yes, knowing that the journey they had built was already a promise fulfilled. They married surrounded by people who understood that love takes many forms, and that devotion is measured not by sound, but by consistency. Their life together became a quiet legacy, one that proved patience can be powerful, that effort can be beautiful, and that learning another's silence can teach the deepest form of listening. Destiny, watching from a respectful distance, was satisfied. This was not a love that demanded to be heard. It was one that chose to endure. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and leave a comment sharing your favorite moment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell to receive alerts for new, romantic stories. Thank you for listening, and may your own story be filled with love.